November 1952, somewhere over North Korea. Captain James Holloway's F-86 Sabre has just taken a hit. MiG-15 came out of nowhere, cannon rounds through his engine. The jet is dying, losing power, altitude bleeding away. Holloway reaches for the ejection handle. Standard procedure when your aircraft is critically damaged over enemy territory. Eject, parachute down, hope you land near friendly forces or get picked up by rescue helicopters before the enemy finds you. He pulls the handle, nothing happens. The ejection seat is jammed. Mechanical failure, probably shrapnel damage from the MiG's cannon fire. Holloway pulls again, still nothing. He's trapped in a crippled fighter jet, losing altitude over North Korea, with no way to get out. He has maybe 10 minutes before the aircraft becomes unflyable, and he has a decision to make. Try to nurse this dying jet back to friendly territory, or put it down in North Korea and become a POW. Neither option is good, but Holloway is a fighter pilot, and fighter pilots don't give up their aircraft without a fight. Let me give you context. November 1952, the air war over Korea is intense. American F-86 Sabres versus Soviet-made MiG-15s flown by Chinese and North Korean pilots. It's jet versus jet combat, the first of its kind in history. The missions are dangerous. The MiGs are good aircraft. The pilots are skilled. And if you go down over North Korea, your survival odds are maybe 30%. Holloway is 28 years old, from Texas. He's been flying combat missions for 7 months. 34 missions, 2 confirmed MiG kills. He's a good pilot, confident, aggressive, but he's never faced a situation like this. Dead engine, jammed ejection seat, and he's 50 miles north of the front lines, deepest he's ever been in enemy territory. His wingman, Lieutenant Danny Park, is on the radio. "Mustang 6, you need to eject, now that bird is done." Holloway responds, "Negative, ejection seat is jammed, I can't get out." Park is silent for a moment. Then, "Jesus, okay, I'm with you, we'll figure this out." Here's what Holloway is facing. His engine is producing maybe 20% thrust, enough to keep him airborne at reduced speed but not enough to climb. He's at 15,000 feet and descending slowly. The aircraft is controllable barely, but it's getting harder. The control surfaces are sluggish, and he can smell smoke in the cockpit. Something's burning. He has maybe 15 minutes before either the engine quits completely or the fire spreads and the aircraft becomes unflyable. In 15 minutes at his current speed and rate of descent, he can cover maybe 40 miles. The front line is 50 miles south. He's not going to make it. Park knows it too. He's doing the math. "Mustang 6, you're not going to reach friendly territory. You need to find a place to set down. I'll call in rescue." Holloway considers it. Put the aircraft down in a field somewhere, hopefully in one piece, and wait for rescue helicopters. But rescue over North Korea is risky. The helicopters are slow, vulnerable, and the North Koreans respond fast to downed aircraft. Even if the helicopter gets there, Holloway might be captured before they can pick him up. Then Holloway has an idea, a crazy idea, but maybe his only option. He radios Park. "What if I don't try to reach the front line? What if I aim for the coast?" Park is confused. "The coast, that's east. You're heading the wrong direction," Holloway explains. The Yellow Sea coast is about 45 miles east of his current position. If he can make it to the coast, he can put the aircraft down in the water, ditch it in the Yellow Sea. American naval forces control the Yellow Sea. Destroyers, cruisers, rescue vessels. If he can get over water and ditch successfully, the Navy can pick him up. It's a long shot. He's never practiced ditching a jet fighter. The training says it's nearly impossible. Jets aren't designed to land on water. They break up on impact. But Holloway figures it's better odds than trying to land in North Korea or trying to reach the front line in an aircraft that won't stay airborne much longer. Park thinks about it. "That's insane. You're going to ditch an F-86 in the Yellow Sea." Holloway, "You got a better idea." Park doesn't. He radios the situation to the mission controller, explains that Holloway can't eject, can't reach friendly territory, and is attempting to reach the coast for a water ditching. The controller is skeptical but authorizes it, tells Park to escort Holloway as far as possible and call in Navy rescue. Holloway turns east. His engine is barely running now. He's at 12,000 feet, descending at about 500 feet per minute. The smoke in the cockpit is getting worse. He can see flames through the vents behind the cockpit. The fire is spreading. He does the math. 45 miles to the coast. At his current speed, that's about 12 minutes. Rate of descent says he'll be at about 6,000 feet when he reaches the coast. Assuming the aircraft stays flyable that long, it's going to be close. The next 12 minutes are the longest of Holloway's life. He's constantly adjusting trim, trying to keep the aircraft level. The controls are getting heavier. The hydraulics are failing. Every small input requires enormous effort. The fire is spreading. He can feel heat through the floor of the cockpit. His boots are getting hot. And he's dealing with something else, fear. Not panic, but cold, clear fear. He's probably going to die. Even if he makes it to the coast, even if he ditches successfully, the odds of surviving the impact are low. And if he survives the impact, he has to get out of the sinking aircraft and hope the Navy finds him before he freezes or drowns in the Yellow Sea in November. But Holloway keeps flying. Because that's what pilots do. You fly until you can't fly anymore. Park stays with him the whole way, talking to him on the radio, giving him updates on position, distance to coast, relaying messages to Navy rescue, just being there so Holloway isn't alone. At the 8-minute mark, Holloway is at 8,000 feet. The coastline is visible ahead, maybe 20 miles. He might actually make it, but the fire is getting worse. Smoke is filling the cockpit. He can barely see his instruments. And the control stick is almost immobile. The hydraulics are gone. He's flying on manual reversion, using pure muscle to move the control surfaces. At the 10-minute mark, Holloway crosses the coastline. He's over water. Altitude is 6,500 feet and descending. Park radios. Mustang 6, Navy has your position. Rescue vessels are en route. You need to get down now before that fire takes the aircraft. Holloway doesn't respond. He's too busy trying to keep the aircraft under control. He starts a shallow descent toward the water. The procedure for ditching a jet, according to the manual, is to approach as slow as possible, keep the nose slightly up and try to pancake onto the water. Minimize forward speed, maximize the time between initial impact and the aircraft breaking up. It's theory. Nobody has successfully ditched an F-86. The manual basically says, if you have to ditch, good luck. You're probably going to die. Holloway is at 2,000 feet when the engine finally quits completely. Total flameout. He's a glider now. A very heavy, very aerodynamic glider with a descent rate of about 3,000 feet per minute. He has about 40 seconds until impact. He uses those 40 seconds to set up the approach. Airspeed as slow as he can get it without stalling. Nose slightly up, wings level. He's aiming for a spot in the water about half a mile from the coast. Park is overhead watching. Later, Park will say it was the most beautiful piece of flying he'd ever seen. A crippled jet, no engine, no hydraulics, smoke pouring out, and Holloway is flying it like he's doing a training exercise. Smooth, controlled, professional. 10 feet above the water, Holloway pulls back on the stick as hard as he can. The nose comes up. The aircraft slows and then it hits. The impact is violent. The aircraft skips once like a stone on water. Then it hits again and starts to break up. The canopy shatters. Water floods into the cockpit. The aircraft is sinking fast, and Holloway, who's been holding his breath since the impact, is underwater, upside down, trapped in a rapidly sinking fighter jet. Here's where instinct and training take over. Holloway doesn't panic. He knows he has maybe 30 seconds before the aircraft pulls him too deep to swim back up. He releases his seatbelt harness. The quick release works, thank God. He pushes himself out of the seat, but his leg catches on something. He's stuck. Underwater in the dark with his lungs starting to burn, he reaches down, feels around. His flight suit is caught on a piece of torn metal. He pulls. It doesn't give. He pulls harder. Feels the fabric tear. And then he's free, swimming up or what he thinks is up. It's disorienting underwater, especially when you've just survived a plane crash. He breaks the surface gasping, looks around. He's maybe 20 yards from where the aircraft went down. He can see the tail sticking out of the water, sinking slowly. Park is overhead, circling. He sees Holloway in the water and radios. I see him. He's out. He's alive. Holloway inflates his life vest. Standard survival gear for pilots flying over water. The vest keeps him afloat, but the water is cold. November in the Yellow Sea, water temperature is maybe 45 degrees. He's got maybe an hour before hypothermia incapacitates him, probably less given the adrenaline crash and physical exhaustion from the ditching. He needs rescue fast. The Navy rescue vessels are 20 minutes away, too long, but there's another option. A Navy helicopter already airborne for a different mission hears the emergency call and diverts. It's 10 minutes from Holloway's position. The pilot, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Morrison, pushes the helicopter to maximum speed. Meanwhile, Holloway is treading water. He's in pain. His back hurts from the impact. His leg is bleeding from where it caught on the metal, but he's alive and conscious. That's more than he expected 5 minutes ago. Park is still overhead, marking Holloway's position. He drops a smoke marker to help the helicopter find him. The orange smoke drifts across the water. 8 minutes after ditching, Holloway hears the helicopter. A beautiful sound, the rhythmic thump of rotor blades. The helicopter appears, hovers overhead, lowers a rescue basket. Holloway grabs it, climbs in. They winch him up. He's on the helicopter deck, wrapped in blankets, shaking from cold and adrenaline. Morrison, the helicopter pilot, looks back at him and says, "Hell of a landing, Captain." Holloway manages a weak smile. "Thanks for the ride." The helicopter takes him to the USS Valley Forge, a carrier operating in the Yellow Sea. The ship's medical team checks him over. Bruised ribs, lacerated leg, mild hypothermia. Nothing life-threatening. He's incredibly lucky. The flight surgeon tells him, "You should be dead. That ditching shouldn't have been survivable." Holloway shrugs. "Yeah, I know, but I'm a stubborn son of a bitch." News of the ditching spreads through the carrier. Pilots come to see him. They want to hear the story. How he flew 45 minutes with a dead engine. How he ditched an F-86 and survived. How he got out of a sinking aircraft underwater. Holloway tells the story, matter-of-factly, no embellishment, just what happened. The pilots are amazed. One of them says, "You know the manual says ditching a Sabre is basically impossible, right?" Holloway nods. "Yeah, I read the manual, figured the guy who wrote it never actually tried it, so I gave it a shot." The story reaches Admiral Turner Joy, commander of Naval Forces Far East. He wants to meet Holloway, personally thank him. The meeting happens 2 days later. Joy asks Holloway, "Captain, why didn't you just bail out over land and take your chances as a POW?" Holloway explains about the jammed ejection seat. Joy nods, then asks, "But why risk ditching instead of just putting it down in North Korea?" Holloway thinks about it, then says, "Sir, that was my aircraft. I'd flown 34 missions in her. She was shot up on fire, barely flying. But she got me to the coast. Felt wrong to just abandon her in North Korea. Figured if she was going down, she should go down in friendly waters." Joy looks at him for a long moment, then says, "You're either the bravest pilot I've ever met or the craziest. Maybe both." Joy recommends Holloway for the Distinguished Flying Cross. The citation reads, "For extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight. Despite catastrophic damage to his aircraft and a jammed ejection system, Captain Holloway displayed exceptional flying skill and courage by successfully piloting his disabled aircraft 45 miles to friendly waters and executing a successful ditching, thereby preserving his life and denying the enemy the intelligence value of his capture." The medal ceremony happens in January 1953. Holloway's squadron mates attend. Park, his wingman, is there. So is Morrison, the helicopter pilot who pulled him from the water. It's a celebration, but it's also a reminder. What Holloway did was extraordinary, but it was also incredibly risky. He could have died a dozen different ways. The aircraft could have broken up before reaching the coast. The fire could have reached the fuel tanks. The ditching could have killed him. The ejection from the sinking aircraft could have failed. The cold water could have taken him before rescue arrived. Any one of those failures, and Holloway doesn't come home. After the ceremony, Morrison approaches Holloway. She says, "I need to know something. When you were in that cockpit, fire spreading, controls barely working, flying over enemy territory with no way out. What were you thinking?" Holloway considers the question. Then he says, "Honestly, I was thinking about a math problem. Calculating whether I could make it to the coast before the aircraft quit flying. Everything else, the fear, the fire, the possibility of dying, I pushed that aside. Just focused on the math, speed, distance, altitude, rate of descent. As long as I was solving the math problem, I wasn't panicking. Morrison nods. That's how you survived. You didn't let the situation overwhelm you. You broke it down into a problem you could solve. Holloway, yeah, that and a lot of luck. Morrison smiles. Luck helps, but skill matters more. You were a hell of a pilot that day. Holloway finishes his tour in Korea in March 1953, returns to the States, stays in the Air Force, makes colonel, eventually commands a fighter wing, retires in 1972 after 24 years of service. He never flies combat again after Korea, but he trains the next generation of fighter pilots, and he always tells them, the manual doesn't cover everything. Sometimes you have to improvise. Sometimes what the manual says is impossible is actually just difficult. In 1985, the Air Force conducts a study on jet ditching procedures. They want to update the survival manual based on real-world data. They interview Holloway, ask him to describe his technique. He walks them through it. The approach angle, the speed, the nose-up attitude at impact. The researchers are fascinated. They ask, "Did you practice this? How did you know what to do?" Holloway laughs. "I didn't know. I guessed, figured out what made sense based on physics and hoped it worked." The researchers use his description to create new ditching guidelines. The updated manual now includes specific procedures for ditching jet fighters in water, based entirely on what Holloway did in November 1952. He's the only pilot on record to successfully ditch an F-86 and survive. Now here's the part that doesn't get told often. Holloway's decision to fly to the coast instead of ejecting over land or ditching in North Korea saved more than just his life. It preserved critical intelligence. Holloway's F-86 was equipped with classified systems, radar, communications, weapons systems. If the aircraft had gone down in North Korea, the Chinese and Soviets would have recovered it. They would have learned about American technology. That intelligence would have been used to improve their own aircraft and tactics. By ditching in the Yellow Sea, Holloway ensured the aircraft sank in water controlled by American forces. The wreckage was never recovered by the enemy. That intelligence security was worth as much as Holloway's survival, maybe more from a strategic perspective. The Air Force recognized this in classified after-action reports. They noted that Holloway's decision to ditch in friendly waters prevented potential intelligence compromise. It became part of the justification for awarding him the DFC. But there's another aspect to this story, the psychological impact on other pilots. When Holloway's squadron mates heard that he'd survived ditching an F-86, it changed how they thought about survival. Before, if your ejection seat failed, you were basically dead. Accept it and try to minimize the propaganda value of your capture. After Holloway, pilots knew there was another option. You could try to get to the coast. You could attempt a ditching. It was desperate and the odds were terrible, but it was possible. That knowledge mattered. It gave pilots hope in situations that previously seemed hopeless. Several pilots in subsequent years, facing similar situations with jammed ejection seats or damage too severe to reach friendly territory, attempted water ditching. Not all of them survived, but some did, and they all cited Holloway's example as the reason they tried. One pilot, Captain Richard Stone, ditched his damaged F-86 in the Yellow Sea in March 1953. Survived the impact, was rescued by Navy helicopter. Stone later wrote, "I knew ditching was possible because Holloway had done it. If he could fly 45 minutes on a dead engine and put it down in the water, I figured I could manage 5 minutes. That confidence kept me from panicking, probably saved my life." That's legacy. Not just surviving, but showing others that survival is possible. Holloway didn't just save himself. He created a template that other pilots could follow. Now let me address the obvious question. Was Holloway's decision the right one? Or was it reckless? Because there's an argument that he took unnecessary risk. He could have tried to land in North Korea, preserve the aircraft relatively intact, and become a POW. Uncomfortable but safer than ditching in the Yellow Sea. The counterargument is that POW status for pilots was particularly dangerous in Korea. The Chinese and North Koreans targeted pilots for harsh treatment, interrogation, propaganda use, poor conditions. The survival rate for pilots who became POWs was lower than for ground troops, so becoming a POW wasn't necessarily the safe option. Then there's the intelligence argument. Preserving classified systems by ditching in friendly waters had strategic value. That justifies the risk, but ultimately Holloway's decision came down to something simpler. He was a fighter pilot. He'd been trained to bring his aircraft home. When that wasn't possible, he was trained to deny the enemy any advantage. Ditching in friendly waters accomplished both goals, or tried to. The fact that it was dangerous didn't make it wrong. It made it necessary. Here's what I think this story teaches us. First, that improvisation matters. Holloway had no training for this situation. The manual said it was impossible. He improvised based on understanding physics in his aircraft. That saved his life. Second, that calm calculation beats panic. Holloway survived because he stayed focused on solving problems instead of being overwhelmed by the situation. Third, that sometimes the hard choice is the right choice. Ditching was harder and riskier than becoming a POW, but it was the right call for multiple reasons. Fourth, that individual actions create precedents. Holloway's successful ditching gave other pilots hope and a template. His survival wasn't just about him. And fifth, that the manual isn't always right. The Air Force manual said ditching an F-86 was basically impossible. Holloway proved otherwise. Sometimes you have to trust your own judgment over institutional wisdom. James Holloway died in 2009. He was 85 years old. His obituary mentioned his Air Force career, his command positions, his retirement as a colonel. It briefly mentioned that he was a Korean War fighter pilot. It didn't explain what he'd really done. The 45 minutes of flying a dying aircraft, the decision to go for the coast instead of ejecting over land, the successful ditching that the manual said was impossible, the survival that changed how pilots thought about desperate situations. But the pilots who knew him, who'd heard the story, they remembered. At his funeral, 17 fighter pilots attended. Some from his Korea squadron, others from units he'd commanded later. They told stories about Holloway's skill, his courage, his stubbornness, and about that day in November 1952 when he proved that what the manual said was impossible was actually just very, very hard. One of them, a retired general, said in the eulogy, "Jim Holloway taught us that a good pilot doesn't give up. He flies until he can't fly anymore. And sometimes, if he's skilled enough and lucky enough, he survives what shouldn't be survivable. That's the legacy he left us. Not the medals or the rank. The example of what's possible when you refuse to quit." That's the story of Captain James Holloway, the pilot who couldn't eject, the 45 minutes over enemy territory with a dead engine, the ditching that shouldn't have worked, and the survival that changed Air Force ditching procedure.